65 years of UTech. We started in 1958 as the Jamaica Institute of Technology. And in 59, just 1 year later, we became College of Arts, Science, and Technology. And I wanted to note arts. So although we are a technological institution, technology-driven, the arts, journalism as an art, as one of the members of the arts family is here. Our BCAT program, which lives within Professor Barrett's faculty, is a very popular, successful program, and our graduates seem to get employed before they even finish their courses. So if there are any BCAT students here, when you go on internship, please come back. Even if you receive a job offer, come and finish your degree. But our students are in demand for our BCAT, that's Communications and Technology, very popular program. So any prospective students out there, please speak to Professor Barrett, very popular program with a high employability behind it. We are celebrating this major milestone of 65 years under the theme, Forging Technological Innovations and Driving Development. And we're happy to welcome Mr. Desmond Allen to one of Jamaica's most accomplished, respected veteran journalists as our guest lecturer. Now, Mr. Allen, thank you for taking the time to share your perspectives with members of our faculty, staff, students, and guests. We're very much looking forward to the opportunity to hear your insights on the topic, 5 decades of journalism and politics, past, present, and future tense. Now, that's quite a loaded title there, right? So I'm looking forward to what you have to say. Now, as this audience is aware, Mr. Allen is a founding editor of the Jamaica Observer. His expertise over the last 5 decades spans both print and on-air, as well as in local, international media. We will hear more about his illustrious career in the formal introduction, which will be done by one of our own budding journalism students. Suffice to say, Mr. Allen, we feel quite privileged to have a front row seat access today to your repository of knowledge and experience. We are eager to learn more about your own bird's eye view of the evolution of both journalism and the political landscape of Jamaica over the last 50 years of your career. I join Jamaicans in extending congratulations to you and your significant milestone of 50 golden years in journalism, which you commemorated on the 1st of October this year. I believe that deserves a round of applause. And he doesn't look like he's reached 50 himself, right? I am not sure how he's done it. I'm still scratching my head over that one, right? And by the way, he hasn't retired. He's slowed down. He told me he's not doing as much as he used to, but he's still very much there at the Observer. And I said to him, well, after you officially retire, perhaps there might be a home for you here at UTech. I'm sure our students would be more than privileged to have Desmond Allen as a visiting lecturer, because he said to me he doesn't want to go back to a full-time job. So I said, at least you can come and be a visiting lecturer. And there you go. Professor Barrett has already given you your job title, sir. so you know what exactly you'll be doing after retirement, which is a good thing. And so UTech is pleased to be associated with your significant milestone, and this distinguished lecture at Jamaica's preeminent national university is certainly a fitting addition to this celebration. Now, ladies and gentlemen, UTech is well known for its reputation of producing work-ready graduates who are not only proficient in theoretical knowledge, but are also well prepared for practical skills, and they hit the ground running. And I just visited our Police Commissioner, Major General Anthony, who's an alum, a past student of UTech, studied engineering right here. And his staff were telling me that our students, when they do their internship at the JCF in their communications department, they typically get offered a job. So when we say our students are work ready, this is not just words or rhetoric. It's what we do and will continue to do. This distinguished public lecture is in keeping with that thrust of providing our students with vast opportunities for expanding their knowledge and skills. And one very good way of doing that is through these kinds of interactions with persons like yourself, experts from industry. So Mr. Allen, congratulations on the launch of your first book. There might be more to come, because I notice you've called it Volume 1, right, of Desmond Allen's greatest hits, Wondrous Tales of Extraordinary Jamaicans. And there are many of them, so I'm sure several volumes to come, indeed. And this volume features 20 Jamaican hitmakers. I encourage our audience to get your hands on a copy of the book. He's here, so he will autograph them, he will sign them for you. And we are pleased to note that Mr. Allen will donate part proceeds from the sale of his book towards scholarships for university journalism students. So again, I extend a warm welcome to our in-person guests, and hopefully soon to join us, our online audience as well. Students and guests, I encourage you to participate freely in the question and answer session at the end. And of course, Mr. Allen will be here to mingle afterwards. So thank you for coming, and do enjoy the lecture and have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen, like the President, when I saw the title, you know, I didn't even see the rest as yet. I just saw greatest hits. And I'm a hits girl. I love music. And I love to make use of the hits. I love to dance. So I said, wow, but I didn't know he was into, This is what you call literary liberty. And after 50 years in the field, he has earned the right. And so we engage with it, and we broaden our understanding of the word. So far, we have thought that it's limited to music. So ladies and gentlemen, we come from Jamaica, we are part of the Caribbean, and the President used the word fabric earlier, and I think if anything is in the fabric of our being, it's music and dance. Do you agree with me? And that means anytime we have a program, we have to infuse a little of that. And so we want to ask the UTech Jamaica Dance Ensemble to come and deliver a cultural item. Let's hear it for them, please. entertaining us with Ibo, tan, tan, tan. Ibo, dan, tan, tan. Whatever that is. we appreciate the infusion of the arts. You know, some time ago I was doing a research on the place of qualitative research within a technical university. And the head of the graduate studies unit said, yes, within this hard science, you need the qualitative. But after this, I'd like to add that we also need the performing arts so that our students know how to be not only work ready, but well-rounded. And that is important. And so I would like to invite one of our well-rounded students from the Bachelor of Arts, Communication Arts and Technology program, Miss Shay Devon Ellis, to introduce our guest speaker. Let's hear it for her.
Hello. Dr. Kevin Brown, University of the Technology Jamaica's President. Professor Colin Giles, Deputy President. Professor Charmaine Barrett, Dean of the Faculty of Education and Liberal Studies. Reverend Dr. Stevenson Samuels, University Chaplain. Deans, heads of schools, members of faculty and staff. Representatives from the media and the journalism fraternity. Other specially invited guests and students, our distinguished lecturer, Mr. Desmond Allen, and members of his family. Members of the press, good afternoon. It is my pleasure to have been asked to introduce Mr. Desmond Allen. With a career spanning an impressive 5 decades, he is a distinguished figure in the world of journalism with an indelible mark on our media landscape. His odyssey began in 1973 at the Gleaner after leaving Cornwall College. Shortly after, he received a French government journalism scholarship to the University of Strasbourg. His expertise, dedication, and keen insight soon allowed him to take on pivotal roles in both print and broadcast journalism. Mr. Allen is the founding editor and current executive editor for special assignments at the Jamaica Observer. He has also served in the capacities of president of the Press Association of Jamaica, as well as director of news and information at the Jamaica Information Service, among many others, of course. These stand testament to the fruits of his unwavering dedication and hard work. Throughout Mr. Allen's remarkable career, his influence has extended far beyond the shores of Jamaica. He has represented the nation at prestigious international events and agencies. Among these events is the 1983 United Conference in Europe, where he served as the only developing world journalist. Working with the Italian-based Interpress Service, the International Reggae Music Awards in Chicago, and the Spanish News Agency in Madrid are among his achievements. In recognition of his outstanding journalism, Mr. Allen has been bestowed the national honor, the Order of Distinction. In addition to being well decorated, this veteran journalist is a compelling storyteller. In celebration of 50 golden years in journalism, he has authored the book, Desmond Allen's Greatest Hits, Wondrous Tales of Extraordinary Jamaicans. This recent publication delves into the lives of Jamaican trailblazers, visionaries, and everyday heroes. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming a storyteller whose words transcend time and borders, a wordsmith par excellence, Mr. Desmond Allen.
Really flattered and humbled. I really would not have thought. flattered and humbled. I really would not have thought that with all the great people that Mr. Allen, at the height of his prowess, as what I would refer to a master craftsman, as a journalist, would have seen me and my story as worthy to join the other persons.
Desmond Allen's greatest hits won your stairs of extraordinary Jamaicans. Two things there. One, how do I qualify to have greatest hits? 50 years in journalism. So I'm choosing my best works, some of my best works from the 50 years. Then no. I decided that the best thing that represents what I am as a journalist are people, you know, and those who have contributed to the lives they have lived, to the building of Jamaica. And so these 20 extraordinary Jamaicans, I selected them.
Dad would always say to me, he say, you see that man, Desmond Allen? He said, that man, right, take out his pen against you. And said, the Lord be with you, right? And, you know, to have watched this relationship foster over the years and to see the incredible job that you have done for the Jamaica Observer. The Jamaica Observer was founded on the principles of a balanced democracy for the incredible country of Jamaica. And it would never have happened without you, Desmond.
I can't recall ever being honored in this way, and I'm absolutely not accustomed to it, you know. Journalism can be rough, you know. You have some people, they don't have to know you. They just have to disagree with something that you write. And they will describe every part of your mother. So I'm accustomed over the years to hear, you see that journalist boy, the Desmond Allen, he's a fool, you know. He's a fool, you know. Many journalists can tell you about that. But now that I'm here, Dr. Brown, I have to reflect on some of those descriptions. Because when Hector Wheeler, I'm sorry, he apologized for not being here in person, when he proposed the idea to me of doing this distinguished lecture, I said yes unhesitatingly. And so now, you know, I'm reminded of the phrase that says, fools rush in where angels fear to tread. And so it makes me reflect on all those people who say, you see that boy Desmond Allen there? He's a fool, you know. Professor Sherman Barrett, it's wonderful to see you again. those days when I was volunteering with Just Say, I kind of miss them. And the leaders, some of whom have moved on. But I got the chance to meet you, and it's really nice again to see you here today as moderator. Dr. Kevin Brown, when I saw you, sir, I said, the unmistakable Dr. Kevin Brown, because his reputation precedes him. And as a journalist, I took notice of him even before coming here today. Professor Colin Giles, Deputy President, very pleased to meet you once again, sir. Ms. Marion Brown, is she here? Vice President, no. Dr. Stevenson Samuels, of course, he was here earlier, right? He stepped out. And deans, heads of schools, members of faculty and staff, representatives of media, the journalism fraternity, other specially invited guests, including those who will join us by YouTube, students from UTech Jamaica, and from visiting tertiary institutions. Good evening. I'm happy to be joined on this occasion by my wife, Jennifer, who is way up back to the extreme left. She's waving there. And she has asked me to say, she's not distancing herself from what I have to tell you today, but she's still at work. You know, so you hear of me being a member of the staff of Jamaica Observer, in fact, the first employee. She works for the Daily Gleaner. So Jennifer, I'm glad you're able to be here because she's not very well and she's still on the job. It was nice, my daughter Tara Gale is here. Tara Gale flew in from Florida to make sure she's here. And the whole idea of her coming is not so much to show how much she supports me, but she's on a project to transform me into a social media star. I have told her over and over, good luck with that. That is very unlikely to happen, but she's very determined. And Dr. Brown, you mentioned my grandson. It's a grandson. It feels more like my son than my grandson. Now, may I just mention very quickly that, I've seen some acquaintances in the audience, people who have passed or have crossed paths during my 50 years, and it's very good to see some of them here. Beverly Josephs, of course, Nigel Cook, Mel Cook. Mel Cook is, of course, part of the UTech family. But when I saw him today talking up to my wife, because they work together at the Gleaner, I told him I don't want to see him talking up to my wife because he's too handsome. Karen Smith, she's still, Karen. Karen came in from Maryland and has just been throwing her support behind me, starting with the launching of the book and now this event here today. Thank you all, thank you very much. To UTech Jamaica, celebrating our 65th anniversary, I know people still say CAST. I remember College of Arts, Science and Technology. But I have a little affinity with CAST because somewhere in 1975, still as a fairly green reporter, I came up here for the first time to cover a strike by students. I never forgot it. One of my sons actually did his first degree here. And my grandson, he very recently completed his first degree here as well. One of my brothers was a member of an athletic team called, people used to call the Bolts of Lightning. Ever heard the term, any of you? Yes. Yes, he was a member of that. And I know many others, you know, who left from Cornwall College and came to CAST. They're all doing very well out there and representing UTech very well. So I know that this is a kind of institution that certainly I would want, and I have had my children, my relatives attend, and I can speak as a witness that they have done very well. To get now to the business at hand, I want to start by being very fair to you that I'm going to disabuse you at the very outset of any notion you might be suffering that I'm here to bring a feast of intellectual brilliance or treatise of monumental proportion that is going to usher in the new Renaissance. I must confess, I am ever only a glorified newspaper reporter who has just spent the last 50 years watching Jamaica and Jamaicans evolving, devolving, and revolving in an endless cycle of hope and despair, triumph and failure. The magic of all this is that I have lived to tell the tale. And as I said, watching Jamaica, I haven't just been watching, you know, just being very aloof and not being part of what was happening. I was just not an aloof bystander. I was informing, disseminating, interpreting, criticizing, occupying that proverbial front row seat as history literally unfolded before my very eyes. American Mr. Philip L. Graham, the late president and publisher of the Washington Post newspaper, he argued in a newspaper speech somewhere in 1963 that journalism is the first draft of history, because much of what you read today as history, past history, are written by journalists. And so I feel like, you know, I was in a privileged position. My view is that journalism is also an accomplice to history. As a witness, I have been a part of that construct. Would it bother any one of you here today if I were to tell you that some of the things you know about Jamaica, I might have put it in your head? Now you know that you're in serious trouble, right? But I've decided against regurgitating information and research findings that you likely have to spend much of your time here doing. Instead, I have chosen to leverage an almost unique position that I enjoy. There can only be few and very few other mainstream journalists practicing today who can claim 50 years of being at it and being able to come to you now as a primary witness. I have been in the room so many times. I have seen and heard some things that you might not have, and I will share some of it with you as time allows, or if I am free to divulge, because, you know, those of you are very, very aware of journalism and how it operates. Some of the spiciest things that you hear, people tell you off the record. You can't say it. You can't write it. So what is the sense of you telling me, that I can't write the real story? But your challenge today will be to decide whether you find me a credible witness. And if you do, you'll have an opportunity at the end of the presentation to cross-examine me. And so I invite you to walk with me now through 5 decades of journalism and politics, past, present, and future tense, and see if there is something I can leave with you, something that might help you to understand a little bit more about this country you call home, and see a little more clearly the road that we took to 2023. The question I wish to pose is, what more can journalism and politics, this twin bastion of power, with all its glorious uncertainties, its infuriating complexities, and its unending search for great nation status, what more can it do for us that might yet help to light the way forward? For good or for bad, I became a witness to many of Jamaica's critical moments when I stepped through the doors of the Gleaner Company at 7 North Street, Kingston on October 1, 1973. And there's a little story as to how I got there from my little unheralded district of Granville in St. James. I won't give you the full story, because I don't think we have all that time, but I want to mention the story of 3 fateful telegrams. To the young people now, when I say telegram, they might be thinking of the social media telegram. No. In my day, the telegram was the only way they could get urgent news to you. So the telegram man would come to your district and ask around for the person and deliver the telegram. No internet, no email, no WhatsApp, no messenger, no anything like that. And that for the younger people might be hard to imagine. So, 3 telegrams. Just before leaving Cornwall College, I applied to the Gleaner to be a trainee reporter. And one day, as I was standing by my gate, a man came up. Man looked very frustrated. Man was searching the whole place to try to find me. There was no street numbers and street names. He just come and ask people. So anyway, eventually, they directed him to my home. And he came there and he said, I'm looking for Mr. Desmond Allen. Me, I'm just a little past 18 years old, I see this big man come and ask him looking for Mr. Desmond. I'm saying to myself, Mr. Who? Nobody called me Mr. Desmond, right? So, but I didn't know what. Then I said, well, yeah, it's me. And he said, I have a telegram for you. So the telegram was from the Gleaner saying, I must come to the Gleaner on a particular day to 7 North Street to do a test. So I found myself on the train from Montego Bay. The train doesn't run now, but they did, straight to Kingston. Eventually got there. Well, they ushered me into a large room, larger than this, really. The room was full with people. So I figured, no, I must be in the wrong room. Anyway, somebody told me, no, you go, please have a seat. That was all those people who are going to do the test. Somebody was saying to me, I said, how am I going to get through this? Anyway, I did. And went back home. Then a few weeks later, the same telegram man turned up. But this time he wasn't looking so frustrated because he was able to come straight now. And he found me. I said, I have another telegram for you, sir. Took the telegram. The telegram was from the Gleaner again, said, come to Gleaner, 7 North Street, on a particular day to do an interview. So that suggested that I must have passed the test, right? So I start feeling a little bit, you know what I mean? So I got there, and this time, only 25 people were at the interview. Wow. A few more weeks later, a third telegram. Report for work on October 1, 1973 at 7 North Street, starting at 10 o'clock. Because you know, these telegrams are very brief, right? So I got the job. And I've been at it all this time till now. The Gleaner at the time was really perhaps the equivalent of all these faculties that now offer journalism courses. There were none at any other universities. When you wanted to become a journalist, really, you joined the Gleaner, right? Might go to other media, but there were many, probably one TV station, one radio station, and so on, but you really came to the Gleaner. And the Gleaner had a training program that you're going to go through, training on the job. So there I was, started it. There was no computer. Right? I mentioned earlier on, no internet, no nothing. How do you get news at the time? And it's important, you know, because I think we take things for granted. Otherwise, sometimes we don't quite appreciate where we're coming from and the riches that's innate, you know. We had to be on the job, on the road to get news. Today, you see the journalists just grab up the phones, right? Call so and so. They have the news story, and you can get it out the next day. But we had to be on the road, right? And it was good. It was exciting, I thought, for a young man. It was not always good. Let me say, there are times when things happen that you never like. I can give you an example. I was covering the shipping beat. So I had to go on the waterfront every day, talk to the people at the entities, and that included the Marine Police headquarters. So I would go to the Marine Police headquarters. They allowed me to come on their big book, their logbook. They said, go to the logbook and take whatever information you think you need. So I used to do that. One day, I saw a bit of news in the big logbook. I said, wow. It said that there was a robbery on the same premises with the Marine Police headquarters. The robbery caught my attention right away. I said, yeah, I have a piece of front page news here. So I went and I wrote my story and handed it over. The next day it came out on the Gleaner's front page as usual, but guess what the headline said? Robbery at Marine Police headquarters. Now, remember I said it was on the premises, the same premises, not the police headquarters. So when I went that day now to go and collect my news, I saw the police, and they were waiting for me. Where you think you're going? You're now coming here today. They were so angry. So, when did we tell you that the robbery was at the Marine Police headquarters? We said it was on the same premises. I don't know, I couldn't say anything. He said, you know how much trouble we get in with the Commissioner of Police? So that was a bad one for me. I didn't get to go in back there for months. So, you know, I mean, one of those things that I remember, sometimes I can laugh now, but it wasn't funny then. Now, there's something else that we used to have to do as well, which they don't do now. And that is to know where to find the ministers of government and the newsmakers. We had to be very creative. There's no calling nobody or, you know, faxing or typing or emailing or whatever. We had to find out where places that they frequented. So we know, like the men especially who like to drink, we had to find out which bar them drink all the time, right? And we used to have to memorize the motor vehicle, the license plates, so that once you see there, you know the minister is there. I used to cover the airport at one stage, the airport beat, because a lot of ministers, many ministers would be leaving the country without announcing it. And the only way you know is that if you're at the airport and you see them leaving, then you can run up to them and say, Minister, oh, I see you leaving today. What's the purpose of your visits or your trip? And they will give you, sometimes really some private thing, and they beg you not to bother write about it. You decide if you want not to run up. So you know, I just spent the time to say that, particularly for the younger journalists, so that they, you know, they can get an idea of what it was before and perhaps appreciate the situations in which they were. It was also a time, it was very tough for journalists. The pay was low. Probably some journalists still say the pay is low. And many journalists started to drink. They turned to drinking to get through. And they would, but you know, they had to romanticize it, right? So I remember some of them boasting, you know, and me as a youngster listening to them. Oh, lawyers are called to the bar, but journalists are called from the bar. There are some who found it a little bit more palatable to describe journalists then as thinkers and drinkers. But it still comes down to that. They just love the rum bar. As for me and my house, I was never called to or from the bar, thank God. But it was obvious from then that politicians and trade unionists were often like Siamese twins. You could hardly tell them apart. In respect of the two major political parties, the 85-year-old People's National Party gave birth to the Trade Union Congress and later the National Workers' Union. The 85-year-old Bustamante Industrial Trade Union, BITU, itself gave birth to the Jamaica Labour Party. And so you were seeing this mixture, this, as I said, Siamese twin relationship between politicians and trade unionists. And they were the center of the news universe for journalists. Now, if the politician and the trade unionists were like Siamese twins, the journalist, the politician, and the trade unionist formed a love triangle. It's actually a love-hate triangle, because they could not live without each other. Very often they despised each other, but they all knew that they needed each other. Of course, there would come a time when there was a politician who was not into the trade union business, but I'll tell you about it a little later. Into that state of affairs, I arrived in journalism in 1973. The man of the hour was Michael Manley, a journalist who was also a trade unionist, and was also a politician, all three in one. I don't know whether that was mere coincidence or fate. Now you add to that man, add charisma, good looks, and the aura of a political dynasty, because he is the son, or he was the son of the national hero Norman Washington Manley. And I describe him not as the opiate of the masses, but the opiate for the masses. We were so in love with him. Riding on that wave of popularity, Michael Manley launched a series of social legislation that still defines the 1970s and changed Jamaica forever, as the Americans like to say. I witnessed, may I say, Manley's struggle to establish among them equal pay for women, maternity leave with pay, literacy program called Jamal at the time, free education. Well, literacy, she did a lot for literacy, for those of you who don't know. Free education, I'm sure right now UTech students would love to get that back, right? The National Youth Service, the Status of Children Act, which was also called the Bastardy Act, the National Minimum Wage, Rent Restriction Act, Land Lease, and the National Housing Trust. I have named 10, really, out of 35 social legislation and programs that were enormously popular at the time of introduction. Of course, many of them still exist in different forms and under different names today. But for the purposes of this presentation, I want to highlight two of them, the Status of Children Act and the National Housing Trust, both of which appear to come into fruition around the same time. The Status of Children Act of 1976 was meant to remove legal impediments impacting children born out of wedlock and referred to as bastards. Anybody here who's born out of your parents not married, you are not bastards, right? There was a time when they would call you bastard or call you illegitimate. That is not so anymore, thank goodness. But at the time that the law was being formulated, I was very reliably informed by some legal luminaries that one of the key drivers behind the legislation was the significant number of pregnancies among domestic helpers coming out of middle and upper class homes where they worked. The conventional wisdom, according to my sources then, was that the teenage boys in those homes routinely got their first sexual experiences with the household helps, especially the single women, who very often would be quickly dismissed after the pregnancy began to show. The children born out of that painful wrong were never to have the name of their father, their true fathers. In other words, they were to be perpetually treated as illegitimate or bastards. While difficult to quantify now, the value of the Status of Children Act in removing the stigma of illegitimacy from children born outside of marriage in Jamaica is inestimable. Bad as it is, it would have been harder to imagine what the society would have been like with so many of our children born out of wedlock being seen as less than or second-class citizens in their own country. The NHT was officially started in 1976, and even the Trust's website says that today. But I happen to know that the NHT was first started in 1975. I was one of the first contributors, so you probably could call me a founding contributor. I was told by impeccable sources among the architects that shortly after the NHT began to receive statutory deductions, it was discovered that the law establishing the trust was flawed, and so they had to start all over again to make sure that everything was legal. And they started over the next year in 1976. What they did was to offer people like myself who had started to contribute in the year before, say, all right, you can get back your money if you want, but you could also let your money stay and we give you points. I decided to let them keep my funds, such as it could be called then, right? Try to imagine. And I've never really had to apply for my points yet. But the NHT, and it's really worth a place in what I'm saying to you, because in the first year of operations, they issued 193 mortgages. Last year, they were on to 8,000 mortgages, not counting joint mortgage financing programs with private financiers. And that has made such a difference to Jamaicans being able to own their own homes. It is my view that the Status of Children Act and the National Housing Trust are two of the most consequential and most successful actions by our politicians. No government of Jamaica has since attempted to repeal either law, and indeed succeeding PNP and JLP administrations have raided the coffers of the NHT to the tune of $4 billion a year up to recently, thereby, in my view, attesting to its crucial status. But the era of the 1970s was not just about Manley's raft of social programs. When Manley declared the PNP Democratic Socialist in 1974, it upended the political system. In the social upheaval that came with that, journalism became the center of the conflict as both sides fought to win the hearts and minds of the people. The Jamaica Broadcasting Corporation, the lone television station at the time, it was owned by the government, was virtually captured by a mix of PNP supporters and the so-called progressive forces comprising socialists and Marxist-Leninists. Radio Jamaica, the main radio station, was nationalized from British ownership and sold to a combination of worker-centered organizations like trade unions, credit unions, and the like. In 1974, Edward Seaga outfoxed Hugh Lawson Shearer and became leader of the conservative pro-free enterprise JLP, which had a solid backing of the United States. This collision of events was to set up a fierce ideological struggle in which at least what I saw as a young journalist covering that was that Jamaica was divided into progressive forces, those to the left of center, and reactionaries, quote unquote, those to the right of center. In the middle of it all was the pro-business Gleaner company where I worked. Under its editor-in-chief, Hector Winter, a former chairman of the JLP, now turned journalist, the Gleaner newspaper established itself as a sort of opposition to manly socialism, branding it communism in sheep's clothing and decidedly earning the ire of the progressive forces. Some of the main columnists, you'll remember some of the names will still be familiar to some of you. David Acosta, Morris Cargill, Murty Perkins, Thomas Paine, and John Hearn, among others. Inside the country, violence, much of it political in nature and origin, raged out of control. A massive flight of capital and brains sapped the economic energy of the country. Jamaica appeared to be floundering and on the brink of collapse. Many people sold their homes at fireside sales and left hastily, saying they were fleeing communism. One cute graffiti on city walls called for "the last one to leave, please turn off the lights." Into this boiling cauldron of despondency and danger stepped one Oliver Frederick Clark to become the managing director of the Gleaner in 1976. 3 months later, on June 19, 1976, Manley's government declared a state of emergency. You see, that state of emergency is not anything new. That was, the whole idea was to stem the violence and loosen its vice-like grip on the island. The indisputable information that I received and later confirmed with Clark was that he arrived at his office on the Gleaner's 5th floor one morning to find a communication on his desk from the competent authority. Now, when the state of emergency was introduced, they had the head of the police and the army, they were formed a competent authority, and they were supposed to be running things. When Clark read the communication, he felt as if he had received a kick in the stomach. And he uttered something very unprintable. After collecting his thoughts, he phoned Hector Winter, the editor-in-chief, and other managers and set up a meeting. Leslie Ashnine, the Gleaner chairman, was in London vacationing when the phone rang. It was Oliver Clark calling from North Street. He told Ashnine what had happened in Jamaica and specifically about the communication and the competent authority. To comply with the competent authority would have meant the end of press freedom as they knew it. To not comply would risk Gleaner journalists being given indefinite detention, or Gleaner managers, really. So, seeing his managing director's trepidation, Ashanine was, a famous, very old battle axe, was very brutal in his response. He said, "Tell them to kiss my you-know-what." That's how he dealt with it. So Clark felt better. He went back and they decided, all right, what we're going to do is, we're not going to send the paper to them before it's printed. We're going to print it and then send it to them. And that's what they did. So they got quite a few calls from the competent authority after, but then nothing really came of it, and they moved on. 1976 was indeed a year, certainly for journalists, busy year for journalists. Political violence continued to rage, and Trenchtown burned. I saw how closely politics and violence were connected because another journalist and I, journalist named Balfour Henry, we had to be escorted into Trenchtown to interview the dons. We couldn't just go inside there and say we are journalists come to. We had to be escorted in. there was what we call ideological differences, and during the East-West Cold War that reached Jamaica's doorstep, and as a result, there was no shortage of M16 and AK-47 rifles getting into Jamaican hands. I personally covered 11 people were killed one night and 7 on another night, only days apart in one constituency. That's how bad the thing was. In 1977, I discovered quite by accident that the Manley government was in negotiations with the International Monetary Fund. That led to a confrontation between me and the then Prime Minister. My news editor assigned me to go to Jamaica House to cover a meeting between Manley and a group of Rastafarians. Sounded ordinary. But when I got there and I identified myself, somebody let me into the meeting. Now, up to now, I don't even quite understand why. But I heard Manley telling the Rastafarians, well, the Rastafarians are complaining about the treatment that they got from the police for their little ganja, and they wanted the government to do something about it. But I heard Manley telling the Rastas that the IMF is like a vulture sucking the blood of the third world, if you know how Manley spoke. So I muttered to myself, wow, what a story. I didn't see that coming. I said, we're supposed to be this little Rasta, meeting with little Rasta. So I did my thing, I took my notes, and when Manley was leaving the room, and by the time I was getting the names of some of the Rasta delegates, and Manley, I noticed that he, when he was leaving the room, he sort of stopped. And he looked very quizzically at me, and he went outside the room. The next thing I know, his press secretary, Mrs. Corina Meeks, came up to me and said, the Prime Minister wants to see you. Well, I said, okay, see, the Prime Minister has something to add to what he had to say. When I went into the room, all of a sudden this man, blast! This was a private meeting. What are you doing in here? You're not supposed to be in here. Now you're going to have to destroy your notes. Oh, my God. I had just spent 2 hours taking notes. So, listen, this is a Prime Minister, I was a 23-year-old journalist, and Marga like thread those days. And this Prime Minister is on to me like that. So I managed to stutter to say, well, Prime Minister, I can't go and tell my editor that I spent 2 hours and I don't have a story. I'm going to be fired. This man's an actor, Suddenly all the rage gone, Well, Corina, you call it. Why don't you sit down with the young man? I don't want him to get fired. Sit down with him and work out a news release. And that will be fine. So he looked at me and said, is that okay with you? I said, yes, but of course I don't think I had a choice, right? I didn't think I had a choice. I said, yes, sir. Now, when I went back to the cleaner office now, I said, for a matter, I am no longer afraid. I am now in my office and I can decide, am I going to write what I heard or not? So, I thought about it. And I said to myself, the Prime Minister trusted me enough to at least leave with my notes. And the second thing I said, why was he talking about the IMF? Let me make some checks. And I found out that in a few weeks, Jamaica, the government was supposed to go into negotiations with the International Monetary Fund for a loan. So when you think of it, the last thing the IMF people would want to hear is that Manley describing them as a vulture sucking the blood of the third world. So I reasoned to myself, I said, that's not really good. Maybe it's one Manley, but it's not good for the country. And I made a decision that I wouldn't publish it. Now, you can decide, if you were in my position, what would you do? Who said same? Well, that's good to hear, so I don't have to feel so bad. But I don't think that Manley forgot me after all of that. And I should mention, of course, that part of the problem he knew was that the editor-in-chief of the Gleaner was a former chairman of the JLP. So all that was working in his head. Now, I wrote the ganja story. So what happened at the time, and it has evolved since then, was that if you were caught with the ganja at the time, it was 18 months, mandatory. So a lot of Rastafarians were going to prison. So Manley promised to change it to make it a misdemeanor. And he said if you were caught with that tiny amount, you know, slap on the wrist, and you get on your way. So that actually happened. I also remember from 1977 that when national hero Alexander Bustamante died, it was announced that he died on August 6th, which was the Independence Day, Jamaican Independence Day. And this was the gentleman who led Jamaica into independence, August 6, 1962. So some smart politician decided that he died a few days before the Independence Day. But it would look so good if we say he died on Independence Day. And my source came and tell me about it. I mean, we're not talking about source, you know. I never used to talk about DB source. I talk about source, people who know things, right? You could put your pot of fire, right? With people like those. And they told me, no, the man died some days before August 6th, but the politician decided, let's announce it at August 6th. Looks good. It did, not true? Yeah, man, father of independence, you know, and he died on Independence Day. I mean, wow. He told me though, he begged me not to write it. And this is what I say, people give you the sweet piece of news, you know, the juicy piece of news until they say, don't write it. But I never did. Now, all the while, you know, when all of this thing was happening, the virtual civil war was raging out of control in Jamaica. And there were rumblings just over 1,000 miles away to the east in Grenada, which portended ominous implications for Jamaica on the not too distant horizon. At that time, I got my scholarship to France, and it was 79, and I went off. Somehow, very fortunate for me, while I was there in 80. Who was to come there on a concert but Bob Marley? I mean, Jamaica, I've never seen Bob Marley. And I go all the way to France to go see Bob Marley. Cover the thing, you know, really enjoy myself, cover the sent back story to Glee now. Felt good. I remember the headline to this day. The headline says, "Triumph in Strasbourg," because Bob Marley was just such a hit there. And it turned out that it was his last tour of Europe, because then he came up with the cancer thing, and he died in 1981. So I felt like I saw one of his last concerts. I felt a little special, that, wow, how you lucky so. And indeed, I'll be back in time in Jamaica to cover the funeral and receive an award from the Press Association of Jamaica as the best news story of the year, that particular year. The 1970s now would climax with the general elections of October 30, 1980, in which the PNP suffered its biggest trouncing since universal adult suffrage in 1944. 51 seats they got, or 58.8% of the votes, the JLP, and 9 seats to the PNP. That now brought an end to the whole social experimentation thing that was happening in the 70s. Society calmed down, scarce basic goods that you couldn't find anywhere just suddenly returned to the supermarket shelves. But it seemed as if something had happened in that era because people became very individualistic. And it was every man for himself. And there were some people who started to describe the 80s as the lost decade. But yet by 1981, despite all that sweeping out of the PNP, by 1981 they wanted the PNP back in power. I don't know what it is that, what do you do with people? Can they be so fickle? The popularity of the Siaga regime had evaporated as it made little headway in the economy. And that is despite serious effort, The administration made very serious efforts. And they got better terms from the IMF. And they freed up imports. They really did a lot. However, people not satisfied, and they wanted back Manly. The stone polls, for those of you you need your statistics. The stone polls, the Carl Stone polls at the time, found that the JLP had slipped from 59% down to 47%. A year later, it's in 1983, in October 1983, Siaga was handed a political gift, I call it. And he grabbed it with both hands, right? The 1979 revolution, to which I referred a little earlier, by Prime Minister Maurice Bishop in Grenada, had imploded on itself. That is after some hardliners in the New Jewel movement insisted that Bishop was too soft on the West and was a threat to the leftist revolution. When Bishop rejected demands to share leadership with Bernard Cord, a former student of Jamaica's Trevor Monroe, who was then leading the Marxist-Leninist Workers' Party of Jamaica, the hardliners put Bishop under house arrest. The masses of the people arrested the popular Prime Minister away, and on the way to the military armory, they were intercepted by the Grenadian military, and Bishop and most of his cabinet ministers were assassinated, and the body buried in an unidentified location. To this day, Bishop's body has not been found. But Eastern Caribbean leadership, so you will know this, invited the U.S. under President Ronald Reagan to come and, put down the coup. Jamaica contributed Jamaica Defense Forces troops. But there was a political talking point that said Manley and Bishop were so alike that something like what happened in Grenada could happen in Jamaica if Manley were Prime Minister. That was a political talking point. And I think it took off with people. So that surge that the PNP had in the polls went right back down. And Mr. Siaga, no, smart politician, I want to tell you that. He saw an opportunity and he called a snap general election for 1983. Remember, he had just won in 1980, late October 1980. Now, with hardly 3 years later, he called a snap election. And noticing now that he was being outmaneuvered, Manley decided, I am not contesting this election. I'm leaving them to have them election by themselves. All right? That would make Jamaica now a one-party state, and he knew that. I was in the room again at NW headquarters. By then, Manley was also the president of the NW, and I heard them back and forth, and that's before, they had called a press conference, that's how I got there. But they were in a room next to where I was, arguing, the leadership of the NW, arguing about whether they should boycott the thing or not. Because some people say, hey, if you boycott it, you're going to give the man them all 60 seats in the House, what's going to happen to we, right? And Manley tell him, if we're not boycotting it, I am no longer going to be president of the PNP. I'm stepping away. And then the people gave in, because this is Michael Manley, right? So they gave in. Now, I want to mention, that I saw for myself, I'd gone to Grenada to interview Maurice Bishop in 1982, the year before the whole revolution exploded. And I saw where I could see the similarity between Manley and Bishop. So I could understand why the argument took root that it could happen. I really could understand that. So the elections were held, and of course the PNP had all 60 seats in the House. Sorry, JLP, thank you very much for that. The JLP, all 60 seats in the House. What Siaga did, and I am obviously very happy for something like that in the life of a country, instead of me decide to go with just the Senate being, all 21 senators being appointed by him, already having the 60 MPs, he decided he would create a thing called independent senators. And so these are people who are obviously not supposed to be, part of PNP or JLP, independent. So that was good. Interesting for me, of course, was that one of the independent senators was a journalist. Because you see, I told you about that nexus, right? So we have that journalist, and we had an independent group of senators which would make sure that Jamaica did not become a one-party state. One of the, well, I should also mention for the record that what the PNP did at that time now was to create what they call a People's Parliament. So they're outside of the House of Representatives, so they started something called a People's Parliament, where once a month they would meet either at the Jamaica Conference Center or the Oceana Hotel at the time and have their thing just like a regular parliament, right? Now, one of the casualties of 1983 was a newspaper called the Jamaica Daily News. That, for 10 years, Jamaica Daily News gave the Gleaner a run for its money. I've always felt a little bit guilty that I had a minor part to play in the demise of the Daily News. Because upon my return from the interview with Maurice Bishop, I joined the staff of the Daily News as chief reporter. And I started a series of articles on what I had seen in Grenada of the revolution. But the Siaga government was very, very, they had inherited the Daily News from the previous PNP government, and they were very suspicious of the Daily News. The Daily News started off very poorly capitalized from the very beginning, and continued to bleed red ink. Now, the JLP, when they saw the first article I wrote about Grenada and Maurice Bishop, which I would have to be honest and admit, it was a good, I would say a good article for Bishop, because it wasn't negative, although I was just reporting what I saw, but there was so much positivity that it looked good for Bishop. And the JLP people, once they saw it, that was the end of the series. So after the first article was published, the orders came down to Carl Wynn, the editor. No more of this. And then, it's like after that, the government would not put one more cent into the Daily News. So it struggled and limped and struggled until April 1983, when it suddenly closed. So I don't know if me have nothing to do with it, right? But I've always felt a little guilty about that. The next big moment now in the 80s was the demise of the trade union movement now, right? So we talked about earlier on, them used to run things. Now the demise of the trade union movement, because the Siaga did not come out of the trade union movement, right? So he wasn't as enamored as people like Hugh Shearer and Manley and the others about trade union movement. So he had little time for them. At the same time, the trade union movement were feeling, this man have no time for us, this man not with us. So they, on a time when they thought it was appropriate, they called a general strike and almost locked down Jamaica for 3 days. Eventually the strike petered out, and because it was going on long and people started to get upset now and so on. Siaga saw another opportunity. I told he's a smart politician. The IMF used to pressure him to reduce the public sector staff because of, they said too much money was being spent on it. So he just used that opportunity and made a big layoff in the public sector that crippled a lot of the trade unions. So that is how he got back at them. But that just hurt Siaga's popularity further, and he never recovered. In 1986, local government elections come, he lost the 1986 elections. February 1989 general elections, PNP won 45 seats to the JLP's 15, and Manley was back. But this time, it was a new Manley. There was a Manley Kariba suit. He used to wear some special suits they call Kariba suits. Suddenly disappeared. And he became well-dressed like Dr. Kevin Brown, right? But more importantly, his philosophy changed somewhat. He figured the sort of socialism that people feared couldn't work in Jamaica, didn't fit in with the culture. So it became sold on the free enterprise system. And so that was the Manley that we got in 1989. In the middle of the new term, that is in 1992, Manley suffered what they told us was diverticulitis, which is I think it's a problem with his prostate, somewhere there. Diverticulitis, and it was so bad. It was so bad, something to do with his colon, that he had to step away from being prime minister. So I was actually there when he was announcing that he had to resign, step down from the thing. But of course, at that stage, I was now editor-in-chief of Jam Press, the national news agency. The elections to replace Manley not only ended the Manley dynasty, which had started from 1938 with the father Manley, Norman Washington Manley, to 1992, but it set off a sprightly contest between P.J. Patterson and the person who would one day become the first prime minister of Jamaica, first woman prime minister of Jamaica, Portia Simpson Miller. Simpson Miller was roundly defeated by Patterson, and she later told me that she knew she would not have won. But she praised P.J. for not holding it against her, and in fact, he made her a member of his cabinet when he became party president and prime minister. P.J. decided that he wanted his own mandate, so in March 1993, he called elections. On the journalist front, at the same time, Gordon Butch Stewart, see him there, he partnered with banker Delroy Lindsay and Trinidadian media mogul Ken Gordon to launch the Jamaica Observer newspaper on March 7, 1993. And I was invited to be founding editor and first employee of what was only the fourth daily newspaper in Jamaica. So when I invited Manley now, right, he's free of political duties, so I invited him to write a column for the Jamaica Observer. He accepted without hesitation. And in my own mind, I said, he must have remembered the young reporter who did not report on his very colorful description of the IMF. Incidentally, CVM TV also came about in 1993. PJ's non-confrontational approach sounded the death knell for political violence, which was very important to us in Jamaica up to that point, because he was pushing for greater values and attitude to help soften the coarseness of the Jamaican social discourse. By 1995, the JLP was in turmoil over Siaga's leadership style, and that produced the Western 11 and later the Gang of Five, of which Pernell Charles, a popular politician, was a member. Eventually, they expelled the Gang of Five, and Bruce Golding left the JLP to form the National Democratic Movement. I invited Pernell Charles to write a column for The Observer because I felt I wanted to keep him in the game. You see, there's something that you can do as a journalist, that many people don't know. Sometimes you can exercise, I'm afraid to call it power, but you can do a little thing, right? That people might respect you enough. So I kept Pernell Charles in the game. And eventually came back and won his seat again and became Speaker of the House, now retired. Bruce Golding returned to the JLP in time for the 2002 elections, but that was the last one that Patterson was going to win, and so he had to wait out his time. Patterson resigned in 2006, and Portia Simpson won the internal elections to succeed him and became first woman president of the PNP and first woman prime minister of Jamaica. Now, and I'm really getting close to the end. It's been a long one, I rather suspect. Simpson Miller, in 2007, was using a recent hurricane at the time, the damage, to postpone the general elections beyond the normal time. And we know, well, not just us in the newspaper business, but many people in the country are saying, what is that going to mean for the Jamaican democracy? So, the Gleaner and the Observer decided to collude and put out front page editorials on the same day, calling on Portia to call the elections. And you don't have to ask who wrote the editorial on behalf of the Observer. So that 2007 election, Bruce Golding went on to win and became Jamaica's 8th prime minister. When Golding stepped down in 2011, Andrew Holness became the short-lived prime minister after calling elections just short of 3 months at the helm. PNP won the 2011 elections, and Simpson Miller was back as prime minister. This administration would be known for the IMF agreement that has since been guiding our economic program under first Dr. Peter Phillips, then Audley Shaw, and now Dr. Nigel Clark. Holness took back the reins of power in 2016 and 2020, becoming, of course, the youngest prime minister in Jamaica's history. Between 1992 and 2023, and this is absolutely my view of how the politics and the journalism has worked since, the flavor and tenure of Jamaican politics has been very bland, and the temperature mostly tepid. And this is likely because of the absence of articulated ideological framework or a vision for an alternative path forward, politically or economically. In other words, there's very little to differentiate between the two major parties. In this vacuum, journalism has largely turned its focus to fashion, sports, and entertainment. You're not getting the hard-hitting, them things we got interview done in the midst of warfare, You're not getting that now. So, sir, question. I am almost at the end, and I understand the need to really question things. I'm getting there. Now, so with the journalism now concentrating on, as I say, fashion, sports, and entertainment, the finance department and not the editorial department is now running things. And that's because there's a fight for financial survival, right? You can't leave journalists now, to make the place profitable, on the morning, because all we want to do is write, right? And put out the stuff. But so it has made a big difference to what, the real character and the nature of it now. At the same time, jostling with the traditional media that I represent is a new guy on the block, the social media. Social media is a real information jungle out there. I don't run with any information I get from social media without first checking and cross-checking. My mantra is, when in doubt, check it out. Still in doubt, leave it out. I want to give that to the journalists who haven't heard it just yet. I know some of you must have. Obviously, social media is one of the new wonders of the world. It is, isn't it? It only has one way to go, and that is up. Yet you have to wonder, how good is it right now to a small, information-starved, still not literate enough country like Jamaica? And can we manage to advance this country without the traditional media? Because the traditional media, you know, we can't live on fake news. We have to, you know, clean up the news, if you like, clean up the information before we sell it to the public, right? And that is what is the basis of the credibility that we enjoy. So until we reach that point where we can be confident in managing the information surge from social media, we need to protect the traditional media. And this is, I'm saying this for advertisers. Don't abandon the traditional media because you're certainly not sure what you're going to get into. And I believe it's a national imperative. Of course, in exchange for greater protection, the traditional media must revive itself, must find ways to give more to the society. And I suggest that one area in which the media can best serve the country is in the fight against crime. Our politicians have lost the battle against crime. Let's not even fool ourselves for 1 minute. They have run out of ideas, calling for divine intervention, which they don't even believe in, or relying on states of emergency, which were meant to be a temporary shock treatment, but now rapidly becoming permanent. Every Jamaican should have an interest in fighting crime, which is no respecter of persons. It doesn't matter if you're PNP, JLP, or an OP. Jamaicans, if Jamaica is relatively crime-free, Jamaicans at home can exhale and enjoy the gifts of our land. Right? Nationals abroad can feel free to visit more often, and those who can to invest in the building of the land of their birth. More tourists will come, and our economy will thrive, thereby reducing poverty and providing a better quality of life for our long-suffering people. I urge the media to consider establishing a media crime watch under the aegis of the Press Association of Jamaica, representing professional journalists, and the Media Association of Jamaica, representing the media owners. Under the Media Crime Watch, we could encourage the public at large to operate as the eyes and the ears of law enforcement, providing anonymous tips to us about the whereabouts and the activities of criminals, and that information we would pass on to the Commissioner of Police. Thank you. We would also appeal to the political parties to remove crime as part of their partisan political agenda and lead their supporters to unite in a national fight against crime. Finally, come to you, sir. Finally, I believe that the media can incentivize the political parties to revive and energize themselves to renew their original intention to serve the country. At election time, the media should seriously consider endorsing a political party. They've never done that. And that party would have to be the one that best meets a set of criteria that redound to the benefit of the entire country as a whole. This endorsement would not be lifetime, but would be exercised ahead of each general election. It might be a new concept to Jamaican media, but it's something which is commonly done in developed countries, notably the United States, where it helps the electorate to decide on a candidate to support. It is my considered view, after 50 years in Jamaican media, that these proposals I have made can help to revitalize both the media and the political community, to lift their game in their stated quest to create a better Jamaica. Let us do it. To the UTech family, and I this time need to single out Michelle Beckford, who was so gracious in really calming me down and allowing me to think I could do this thing, right? And to organize the thing. Thank you very much, Michelle. And I thank Dr. Brown for taking the chance to approve it. It's a big chance. I thank you for that. And I hope that in delivering this lecture, what it might lack in distinction, I hope it would make up for in entertainment. To all of you here and on the live stream, and who have taken the time out of your busy and productive schedules to listen to me indulge in my nostalgia, I appreciate you. And if there is still enough time, I welcome your cross-examination.
Wow, thank you so much, Mr. Allen. So indeed, we are looking at 5 decades of journalism, politics, past, present, and future tense. And I believe, well, in particular, I was really, really informed of quite a bit, and then some things made better sense as we went on. And for young people, I trust that you would have learned a lot about your country. What he has reinforced for me, though, when I watch Lucette, yes, BBC, and I always wonder, why is she putting herself in these dangerous places? And her and others would show me that journalism is not just about doing a job and getting paid, but it can put you in some very dangerous places. Now, this evening, you have allowed me to see that right in Jamaica, you are in dangerous waters when you are practicing journalism in the real sense. So the first thing I had that really grabbed my attention here is that journalism is the first draft of history. And that for me is deep, and I'm going to use it. Not as a phrase,
You're welcome.
but I'm going to look in some journalism for the history that I want.
I don't have the copyright, but I feel I can tell you to go ahead.
Absolutely. And indeed, when I was doing my PhD, the Gleaner, down at the, what is it downtown? The library, National Library, was my best friend as I studied the history of Jamaica and UTech. The articles were great, so I had to capture that. But then I say journalism can be dangerous. And so if we have any budding journalists here, I think you might feel that you're okay because you're just going to cover fashion, sports, and entertainment. But I want to tell you that locked in all of those are some political things as well. Everything is not the big P. And I was amazed, and I'm going to caution you not to tell the story too much, how you collude with the Gleaner to get the elections, because some people might be holding some little things still. Yeah. So let's be cautious.
Let them go on.
All right, journalists know it, let them go on.
Can't say that after 50 years.
All right, good. So you see, it was a journey in education, and really just setting us in a little bit about the history of our country, and really appreciate that. But I saw that you stimulated great eagerness among at least some of us, and with one particular person who was just ready to interrogate you. So now is the time when the others of us who are a little more quiet, you may also interrogate. So the floor is now open. There's a mic here to the side if you want to ask a question. If you want to contend with any point that was made, you may come on down and you may ask your question or make your point. And it's very nice to see that people are moving immediately. So over to you, sir. Go ahead.
All right, good night, sir. Thank you for coming along. I've been in and out due to class, but I would like to ask you a few questions, maybe just one or two. Don't want to hog the mic, right? So, I'd like to ask you, sir, Now that you're a well-traveled man, you've experienced a lot. What do you think of the political situation in Jamaica? You said that it was a bit stagnant. What do you think that you, or just journalists in general, could do to fix that? Because you said that it's the first draft of history, and I think a lot of the time, personally my feelings, that there's a little bit of editing going on. So I'd like to know, pick your brain on what you think of that.
The main job of the journalist really is to report what's happening. His main job is not to tell them what to do. I took a chance in trying to suggest a few things a while ago, which I hope would help. But I cloaked it in the clothes of a suggestion from the journalist, from journalism as a whole, to politics as a whole. That is to say, if I can get my politician to strive to achieve a certain number of criteria that I set, for example, no corruption at all for a certain period, right? If I can get them to do that, then I might improve the politics. Because really, if anybody can show me what is a serious difference between the two parties, I'm willing to listen. You know, I couldn't get, for example, in the 1970s, it was obvious the difference. 1980s was obvious the difference. But into the 90s, especially the middle of the 90s, the parties were very, they're setting up on themselves, they were inward looking. So I would not stay here and suggest to journalists that they indulge in what you're asking. But I would say at the macro level that we should try to incentivize the politicians in as much as we can.
Well said, sir.
Thank you.
So another question I'd like to ask.
Yes.
When it comes down to other countries, because as I've seen and heard from not just the presentation, but your lips as well, that you've gone abroad, and how do you think you'd compare Jamaica growth-wise to other countries?
Economic or by journalism standards?
Well, you can really pick and choose, but...
It could be long.
Could be
I'm very, very proud of Jamaica, I must tell you. I believe, in fact, if I should make reference to the book I did, I chose to do, as my first book, hopefully, something that would give our people an insight into ourselves. Because sometimes I'm not even sure we really understand ourselves. I mean, we know we're great, right? We had no business going to the World Cup in 1998. We don't even have football fields. And then not only did we go mix up with Germany and France and Argentina and all those, we go and win a game against Japan, remember? 2-1, sorry? 2-1. Croatia was 3-1. This guy don't know him football, So, and we did not come last out of the 32 countries. In fact, we came higher than the United States, which didn't score one single point. So how we end up there, And this was the story of Captain Burrell will explain to you. And of course, there are many others. Thalia Lane is another decided that to go and take Island Grill into the United States. Put up 2 stores in the United States. And you know why she had to back away? 9/11. When the terrorists brought down the World Trade Center, every economy crashed. And so she had to come back here. But what it is showing you is something about these Jamaican people, right? They have this way, they will say, for example, if you go into something, you enter into some competition, you come second. If you could have come second, you could have come first. That is all Jamaica people say. So I really wanted to, capture that so in all of these extraordinary people and put something there for our younger people coming forward so they can see their own heroes. You don't have to always look somewhere else to find great people. Some really great people are right here. So that's really how I measure growth, that we have great people, we do great things, but we still have a far way to go.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And my final question for the night.
Yeah.
So, the quote that I keep on hearing reference, first draft of history. We've seen how America has handled theirs, and that they use the media to really, let's say, control how their people see things. And we've seen their skeletons being aired out. How much of this do you think is affecting Jamaica? Because a good example would be, well, I don't really want to re-theorize, right? But we used to hear about the Goat Islands being developed, and we don't anymore. So I'd like to ask you, how much of this do you think is affecting how we see ourselves as a Jamaican people and how we develop?
Well, if I go back to my presentation, I want to be more concerned with what social media is doing to the minds of our young people, and not so much of what America and the others have done in the past. I'm more worried about the young people. We're getting a universal culture that we can't afford as a country. We want things overnight, that's why the scamming is so bad. We can't wait, right? I mean, the people get so angry. I mean, how is it that we're killing our own babies? You know, I'm kind of more worried about that in terms of what's causing this thinking to happen. And I'm really not the expert in it, but I really think that if we understood ourselves better as a people, we probably would not be indulging in those things. Thank you, sir.
Sir.
Thank you. So over to our next participant.
Hello, good night.
Kate Joy, how are you, ma'am? I know you.
I'm good, how are you?
She had something to do with this book, I can tell you.
Nothing to do with this book. My company published this book, Bamboo Sparks.
Yes.
But I'm here thank you. I'm here in a dual purpose and a little petition. I was meant to bring my students. I teach at Jamaica College, and I was invited by your lecturer, Andrew Smith. But because it's 4 p.m. and these boys, you know, they won't go home. They were supposed to meet me by the gate and I don't see them. So I'm sitting up there recording via WhatsApp and sending it to the WhatsApp group and saying, "It's what you're missing?" Because I just teach you this last week. And I tell you that Mr. Bustamante died on the 6th of August. And no goes up. So I'm trying to do a little petition because this can't be the only public lecture you will do for students. See, I'm wearing a little thing here. It's not from this college here, but it's across the street. And my own down the street there, another college, but not a tertiary college. Yes. And those books over there, it's a shameless plug, but they all need to be sold and be in every library of every school in this country.
Thank you.
Hopefully, it will be one of your recommended texts, because it can't be that we're the only ones in here who know the truth of journalism and how the thing really go.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Kate Joy, you know what makes her a little intervention credible more than anything else? She's one of the proofreaders of this book. In other words, one of the persons who had to look at it a little bit more than just read and enjoy herself. Although one might say that she seemed to have been enjoying herself. There were times when she strayed from the proofreading and started to read the stories, which I found very encouraging to me. Thank you very much.
All right, you may go ahead.
Hi, good evening again, Ms. Desmond. Fantastic lecture. Thanks so much. It was like a history lesson, a political history lesson, just listening to you there. So we're really happy to have had you this evening. And regarding the book becoming recommended reading, certainly, I'm sure we will want to do that. And I'm sure many of our students will benefit from having the book on campus. I have two quick questions for you. One was around technology, because I'd imagine that you're 50 years, you'd have probably started out on a typewriter, right, which most of these young people probably haven't even seen one, and now we have the computer. So I wanted to get your opinion on how technology has influenced, newspaper production, perhaps in the newsroom itself as a journalist, and also how will it influence the future? Especially in a world where we speak of artificial intelligence. Will artificial intelligence replace you in the future, especially now that disinformation and people, facts are your own facts, depending on how you define them. So that's one. And finally, you spoke about media houses endorsing political parties. We certainly observe that in the United States, and I lived in the UK for some time, there is that practice as well. The observation I've made is that the politicians then start talking to the media owners. And so you find that media owners become quite powerful people because they can influence the public. And so when they pick a party as their choice, I think it potentially puts too much power in the hands of media owners. But I don't know what's your view and why you think that if the media selects a party, why that would be a good thing.
Yeah. All right, start with the first one, technology. Why it's now worlds apart, really, to be typing by typewriters. As you rightly say, some young people have not seen one, unless they go to a museum maybe. And I sometimes feel like I belong in a museum myself. And no computers. Isn't that hard to understand? Everything is done by computer now in the media house. From the moment you go out and you get a story and you jump around the computer, all the way till it's published, all the way to the presses, everything is computerized. Technology is also changing the way we distribute news, because now online is a big thing. If you have to have a newspaper online, and it's slowly eroding the print media. The print media has been very stubborn, the print media. I really like the print media, so I spent 50 years there. It's very stubborn, because there was a point where once the transistor was invented, to make the radio, people say, oh, death of the newspapers, no more newspapers after this. And it just stayed the course. Then the television came by and they said, oh, this is it now, really. Newspaper done with now. Newspaper stayed the course. So now it's internet and all the cable and all the things, and it's battling, it's battling to stay. I'm not as confident as I used to be to say, oh, it will always be here. But I really believe that on the question of credibility, which I mentioned, we need to hang on to it for as long as we can. I would say, in respect of your last question on the power of the media, I'm kind of hoping that, yes, the power would be there, but that it can be used with some amount of nobility in it, not just looking money all the way and just, just being very rapacious and so on, but do something for the country. That's really what I'm appealing to. I believe our people are at that stage where our media owners and so on can now understand how useful something like that could be if, in fact, they decide to contemplate it. Thank you for your question, sir.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Mr. Allen, for your presentation today. I'm a hardcore scientist. I'm a chemist, but I've always found an interest in...
Chemist?
Yes. So I have a PhD chemist, a lecture here, but I've always found a great interest in history and politics and so on. And so I really enjoyed your presentation.
Thank you, sir.
It made me realize that I'm not as young as I think, because
It brought back
I
some memories.
vividly recall so much of what you said from the political violence of the 70s when I still was a boy, but I great memories to the first M16s in the late 70s, to snap elections and all of that, you know. So I enjoyed that. But I had two questions. One of them was, one, I realized at a very young age, at 18, you were set on being a journalist. Yes. And I wondered what led you to that. And, you know, because you stuck with it for all these years. And the second was, I've increasingly begun to form the view that most of us who come to university are part of the middle class. And unlike the United States, where we have a lot, the middle class has a lot of influence, the middle class here doesn't. And there is a nexus between the upper classes, which have real economic power, the quote-unquote lower classes, which have the voting power, the politicians and the security forces. And I think, to peg back to your solutions about crime, do we really in the middle class have anything to offer to the solution of crime? Because I think none of those individuals really want crime to be solved, because it's such a business. And while you made the suggestions, I wonder if they can really work. So I'd just like to get your feedback on that. Apart from, you know, there's a first question about why you became a journalist in the first place.
Yeah, the journalist part there, it's not a soaring story. It's not a great story to tell why I want to become a journalist. So, and I hope that nobody will laugh, because I was a serious reader of comics, right? I didn't just read comics, I ate comics. And the comic I loved most was one called Superman. Now, Superman's secret identity was a guy called Clark Kent. Clark Kent was a journalist. And Clark Kent would be all over the place, covering all the exciting things, you know. And then when people were not looking, he would change into a Superman thing and do what he had to do. But I really loved the Clark Kent character. And so that's how I decided I want to become a journalist. So I hope, well, thank you for not laughing. The second thing on crime, I really think the middle class has a lot of more influence than you give them credit for. But it's a middle class that's not inspired. It's about just living, you know, educating his children, get the nice car, get the nice house. And again, this is part of the difference with the 1970s, which I probably spent so much time talking about, because you were called to be more than yourself. And despite all the mistakes, you know, what a mistake made then. But you were called to be more than yourself. You were called to be a Jamaican who was responsible for the next Jamaican. Like Jamal, for example, where those of us who as we were leaving school, we were told to come and volunteer to teach the older adults who couldn't read and write, you know. To them, that's not what you're getting now. You know, so I'm myself a bit disappointed about the middle class. I really think they could do a lot more, right? It's not happening. And maybe I hope that more people like yourself would speak out and see if you can awaken a conscience. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Mr. Allen, thank you so much for your wonderful lecture. As a matter of fact, it didn't feel like a lecture. The student said, you are a compelling storyteller, and we really got a front row seat to your compelling storytelling this afternoon. And a lot of what you said, taking us through a veritable journey of the last 50 years, a lot of it resonated with me because I grew up in that era, but I've never quite heard it told like that. So it was nice to journey down memory lane with you as well. And I look forward to the day when you'll come and tell a lot more stories to our students as adjunct professor. That was it, right, Professor Barrett? So my quick question to you, Mr. Allen, was about one of the recommendations you made about newspapers considering endorsing a political party leading up to a general election. I'm curious to know, how would the organization arrive at a criteria for the endorsement, given the vast trust deficit in our society?
Yeah, I know we'll face that, and there's a lot more flesh to be put on that bone. But I think there are enough things that are not happening that we could start with. Like I mentioned, corruption, the promises that are not kept overall, the excuses that are being given, all these things. I think if you looked at the political party that least breaks the rules in these respects, that honors the Jamaican nation, that party would be more, in my view, more deserving to be endorsed. So it would obviously take some, sitting down with the PHA and the owners in the Media Association of Jamaica to work the thing through, and then, but ensure that it is something that the parties could see, certainly if they're willing to look to be a better party, that this could work. Otherwise, it makes no sense. Thank you very much for your comments and your question.
Okay, thank you. We have a question here.
Not getting it. Yep, not your time. All right. Thanks very much for the invitation, Desmond. Desmond, I refer to him as my media mentor. He has been doing it for years, and I'm very happy to come and support. The question I have for you, same thing on the endorsing of media houses for politicians or for the parties. Given what took place recently, when some accusation was made that a particular media house is affiliated to the government and the party, and what was perceived to have happened afterwards, nationwide, and that, don't you believe that there will be some level of
suspicion?
Not suspicion, but how would the mad guy in the road, who believes that if he supports one party, he should shoot the radio station worker who endorsed that other party, how you see that playing out? Because I was always concerned about that part of it, because in the developed countries, it's a different thing. And yes, we came from a mad era of the 70s and 80s with the whole political violence. Wouldn't that kind of rev up back some level of that? And as I said, recently we saw the thing with Nationwide. I don't know if that's perception or coincidence, but I still have the concern that if there is that endorsement, it might cause some of these persons to act in a way in which it was not intended to.
I would not discount your fears, Nigel. And by the way, let me just apologize to Nigel for something. Nigel Cook bought one of the books and is here to collect it from me. We have a special edition, the hardcover, where we put your name on the cover because it's a special book. We're going to take it out of publication on Butch Stewart's birthday next year. So it then will become a collector's item. So he ordered one of those books, and he came here to collect it to make sure he get his thing. And his name is all on it. But guess what? I ran out of the place today and left the book at home. Sorry, Nigel. Sorry, Nigel, but you can come home with me afterwards and I'll let you have it. Nigel, everything is a process. We're growing. There was a time when those countries, America and elsewhere, that are now able to endorse, they had their Wild West. They had their real bad time, you know. So you can't make that stop you from striving for progress. Many of the things we do now, we couldn't do one time, you know. So let's not be afraid to take on an idea. If it seems big at the moment, let's do it, because we can't just, the worst thing is to stay where we are now and to stagnate even further. So although your fears are real, I think we could eventually get over that hurdle with time. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Yeah.
Professor Giles.
Thank you very much. Mr. Allen, you have given us a very inspiring lecture. And for me, like Dr. Rodok said earlier, I grew up during much of the events that you described, you know, in the early days of your journalism.
Yes.
And so, for me, most of the things you spoke about are things that I would have had the privilege and the experience of living through. And for me, it was very inspiring to hear the whole story of Jamaica's history, as it were, during my lifetime, seen from your perspective. And I will definitely take away from this lecture that very famous statement that the journalists provide the first draft of history. If there's nothing else I remember from this lecture, I will certainly remember that. And I can identify with it. My question really is one that it seems, you know, has hit a chord with a number of persons who raised questions or who asked questions before I came to the microphone. And it's about that very brave suggestion that you made that perhaps, you know, media could consider endorsing a political party. And I just wonder, in light of the experience that you gave of what happened when a certain instruction came from the competent authority, when you were at the Gleaner,
yes,
and you had a certain choice to make, and you discussed it with the people and so on who were in charge of the media, and it was seen that the whole practice of journalism could be threatened by that instruction coming down at the time. Do you see the possibility that a move like this on the part of media collectively, given the fact that politics in Jamaica can be so polarized, so that when you have one party in the lead, for example, you still have a hardcore of persons aligned to the other party who will see others on the other side as being an enemy somewhat. Do you think that this approach, if taken, could potentially compromise the perceived objectivity of the media? And if so, how could this be mitigated were such an approach be taken? Thank you.
Yeah. Again, I will accept the risks that you are clearly pointing to. But I believe that we've grown as a country. If I refer again to the political violence, those who lived through it know how frightening and how terrifying it was. Now it is the criminals who have taken over for the political violence. It's such a big change. Things can change, and things have changed in this country. We have to risk things. You don't achieve big things if you don't risk big. Right? The people who bet on racehorses, they can tell you if you bet small bets, you're not going to get much. But if you want serious money, you have to bet big. We have to take some big chances in order to move this country, to shake up where we are. We just seem to be in a bind. So, again, I won't discount any of your fears, but I think it's something we have to face. We have to decide if it's worth it. And I think that the political parties, every election they come out with manifestos. And they put out these manifestos, and I don't know who reads it, but as journalists, you are forced to read it, because you're going to report on it. And then when you look, how many of all those nice things that they put in the manifesto do you see being implemented? Hardly. So I know that they want to do these things, but they can't find their way from the manifesto to doing it, and because of some of the very problems that you raise. So you have to just make up your mind, taking the chance, thinking big, making the sacrifices. And that is how I see. This I know it can be a hot potato, and you can say this thing about me saying endorsement. You are hearing it first here today, because it's a long time I had it in my head, but because of some of the very fears, I don't want people to like what they do at the Inquisition. You hear something they hear where you don't want to hear, and you burn me at the stake. But I really think the time has come for it.
Thank you. I think I have one last question or comment here.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Allen, for your awe-inspiring lecture. There is no doubt you have a wealth of information as a journalist. And we're living in the information age. And everywhere you turn, there's information. People getting tons of information all at once, and it affecting traditional media and, how journalists operate today in the world. And I'm just wondering, do you think, as a journalist, you have more information but less questions? Do you think journalism is suffering from a deficit of questioning? And how do you help journalists ask the questions of today's world, to kind of inspire the imaginative spirit of young Jamaicans? There's a lot of questions to be asked. Everybody seems to have the answers, but sometimes it's how you ask the questions, to kind of help people think about things differently. And do you think journalism today is being stifled by the amount of information that it is being thrown at on a daily basis? And how do you, as a senior journalist, help journalists ask the questions? Thank you. That's my question.
Thank you, sir. There's a view that no amount of information can be too much, right? The more people know, the better. There's this general view. You just have to, as a journalist, you have to find your place in that maze, right? I talk about the challenges now with the media not be, fighting a financial battle to survive. That has affected a lot the quality of the product that we put out. But there are still some journalists who are really in there, slugging it out, trying to do their best, fighting against a lot of hard things, including, again, the social media, because that information you're talking about, that information surge, it's coming mostly from social media now, right? But we just have to stay with our thing. We're the traditional media. We are credible. We are not going to just grab information and throw it out there and hope that, people say, hey, we got it first from you. We want information that people who are researching can use, students in school can use. You have to make decisions. Business people are making decisions. It must be reliable information. It must be based in fact and reality. Some of us are still at it. So while I can't give you any readily baked answer to a very good question, I have to say that we just have to protect our traditional media, because there is that, in that space, there is that one subset of people who are doing what they can to ensure that Jamaica is credibly informed. Thank you, sir.
Let's hear it again for our distinguished lecturer. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, that was good, and yes, I want to I really like that question that you asked, because when I listen to the lecture, as when I do history as an adult educator, and you do the history of your country, and I fall in love with my country every time I hear the history, every time I follow the journey. And then I say, what motivates us now? And so your question, I find, was, I loved it, because it's what I want to challenge the students here this afternoon with. What is driving their question? What is driving their, and it doesn't go for journalists only. It is a question that bothers my own mind. And our lecturer spoke about, is it just the music? Is it just entertainment? Is it just fashion? Is it just the economics? What else? What is it? Because I think the dominant thing in that period was there was some political, there was some philosophical, there was some ideological view that was driving people. And very often I'm hearing that we are lost when you look at the two political parties, that they look alike, and that's because we're not dealing with an era of ideology. It seems as if we have stepped away from that. And what drives us in this time is how much money we can make. And while I'm telling you the answer to our country is some deep ideological conversations that will help to make the difference. So thank you so much. Mr. President, I see you with some bags. I think you're ready to do a little task.
Okay. Oops.
I think we can take the mic.
Yeah. Thank you. Any engineers in the house? I'm supposed to be one, but... Oh, look at this. I'm impressed. So I think we fixed the mic holder, but it's my pleasure to ask Mr. Allen if he would accept a gift as a measure of our appreciation for his distinguished lecture at the University of Technology. We feel really honored and privileged to have you here, sir. And we congratulate you again on your 50 years in journalism and your ability to still put forward bold recommendations that have been tested today, right? Properly ventilated today. And so on behalf of the University of Technology, our staff, students, faculty, I wish to present you with these tokens.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it has been a wonderful afternoon into evening. And so as we bring this evening's activity to a close, I'd like to make some closing remarks, which are really around giving thanks to those who have contributed to the success of this afternoon's lecture. So that's an assumption that it was a success. If you think it was a success, let me hear you give a round of applause. Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Allen, for causing me to think, and I think it's the same for most of us. So I want to thank you for taking the time today to share your wealth of experience and insight with us, and I believe there is so much more. So lectures are good, but you know those kinds of breakfast meetings, you just sit with people? So we might have to plan one or two, you just sit with some young, not just journalists, people who are in communication, just to sit. There's no rush. and time to just talk. You can think clearly and tell us the real stories. Little things in the back, you know, the back things. Very nice. So thank you so much for sharing with us. Mr. President, thank you for not only bringing welcome, but for graciously handing out our thank you token. Thank you so much. Reverend Dr. Stevenson Samuels left us, but if he should listen to the recording any at all, he would hear that we say thank him. We are thanking him so much for his energy all the time and for opening and offering prayers for us. I want to thank the Center for the Arts who entertained us with their performance. Our BA CAT student, Madam Shay Devon Ellis, you hear the thing already, you can imagine, and you hear her voice. Her tonation is good. We have to use them up in us. Everybody hear that the program is excellent. Her tonation is there, I heard it. And so can you imagine when they are introducing her a couple of years from now, Shay Devon Ellis, until the name changes. But enjoy it, girl. But thank you. You are not only eloquent, but as I said, your presence and the way you presented was excellent. So thank you so much. Yes, give her a clap. And then Mr. Allen spoke to this person, and I want to thank her also, Mrs. Michelle Beckford. So let's hear it for her. She's the organizer and the leader of the team in the corporate communication unit. Could you stand so we know who that is? And any of your team members are in the room? They can stand too, so we can see them and acknowledge them. So you stand nowadays? We stand with a hand. No, that's not good. Thank you so much. Thank you. And thank you also to the Printry. These are the people who are in the background, but makes it happen. So, of course, Printry would have things to do with this material, which you should, by the way, just in case you didn't think about it, especially your students, make sure you put it up. You can tell people that you met one of the greats of your profession, those of you who are in the field, and others of us just one of our greats. Again, thanks to the Facilities Management Department and the Marketing Union, the LTSU, for their usual expert technical service. But we want to thank them for pressing, I see him up there taking it, you know. But anyway, for pressing through, despite the challenge we had earlier that had nothing to do with you, but we thank you. Thank you for pressing through. The Calvin McCain Library, we also want to thank you, the Instructional Media Services Unit, for your photography capabilities. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. And then, ladies and gentlemen, when we exit this room, we are going to ask you to join us for some refreshments. And so we want to take the opportunity to thank the Lillian's Restaurant for what we will receive. And I want to thank all of you and those who left for joining us this evening, this afternoon into evening. Because if you were not here, then I guess we would still do it, because you see, we are streaming. And these days you can have just yourself and the presenter in the room, and we can say it was beautiful, because the world will see it a little later. But thank you that you took the opportunity to come, to share the evening with us, and to ask questions. Before I close, I want to invite you to take advantage of the opportunity to purchase your book today and to have it signed by our distinguished lecturer and author. So, so it's pre-signed, so good. So take the opportunity to pass by and grab your copy of the book. Ladies and gentlemen, it was a beautiful afternoon. I thank you for coming, and I trust that you will have a wonderful rest of the evening. Thank you so much.